So I've been thinking about self-inserts since Velma Season 2 came out recently. According to Wikipedia, a self-insert is a literary device in which the author writes themselves into the story under the guise of, or from the perspective of, a fictional character. Unlike the everyman archetype, which has a wide appeal due to their blank slate nature so the audience can easily insert themselves into the story, the self-insert is specific to one person. This trope often gets a lot of pushback for multiple reasons. Oftentimes it tends to be used for wish fulfillment, and the authors can lack self-awareness, to the point where audiences can find the story frustrating. When it comes to Velma, many people, myself included, have accused the main character of being a self-insert of Mindy Kaling, an executive producer on the show, and she more or less alludes to this in multiple interviews from before the show released. In an interview with Seth Meyers, she said that the characters were not defined by their whiteness except for Fred, and that she identified with Velma so much that she decided to change her race to be Indian like her. But I can't help but feel like she's really playing into stereotypes. Like she tells Myers, she's so smart and I just couldn't understand how people couldn't imagine a really smart, nerdy girl with terrible eyesight who loved to solve mysteries could not be Indian. They were Indian nerds. Which, sure, but Velma's a character that's existed since 1969. And this show was a drastic departure for the character, not only in her outward appearance, but the character acts completely different from what we're used to as well. The showrunner and head writer of Velma is Charlie Grandy, who has collaborated with Mindy Kaling on many projects, including The Office and The Mindy Project, another show that, as the name implies, starred Mindy. So the two main forces behind the show have a long history together, and obviously have similar comedy styles. And reading all this, it's not hard to see that the self-insert label was not far off. And instead of making a Scooby-Doo show, they basically used the Scooby-Doo franchise as a skin, and made their own adult comedy. They keep reiterating that they're fans of Scooby-Doo, but you don't really see that in the show, especially when they're constantly making mean-spirited jokes towards the original. And it does honestly feel like Kaling and Grandy just made this for themselves. After reading these articles and watching these interviews, they're not really beating the self-insert allegations. They play into that wish fulfillment fantasy where all the characters have a crush on Velma, even though the characters really don't have any chemistry with her, whether it's platonic or romantic. On top of that, the comedy in this show is really just the writers using these characters as mouthpieces, and instead of making jokes, they're mostly just making statements that I guess are meant to be funny in an ironic way, but it really just falls flat.
How is this the first time hearing of it, Velma?
Because, as rich people say when they're asked to pay taxes, I ain't doing it.
And then there's the commentary, which is just something else entirely.
Fred is probably innocent.
Yeah, but isn't it a little comforting to see a rich white guy get wrongly convicted for once?
I'm too distracted to enjoy it. If I were a rich white dude, I'd kill everybody just to get away with it.
All this may be entertaining and funny to the writers, but ultimately it doesn't resonate with the audience. And it really just shows a lack of awareness on their part, because the writers are in an echo chamber and are only including things that they agree with and find funny, rather than thinking about the wider audience or the wider Scooby-Doo franchise. They were originally saying that the backlash was coming from a small minority, only for the show to ultimately be written off as one of the worst animated shows ever. What makes this even more egregious is that this is supposed to be a spin-off of an already existing property, and they're constantly reiterating in these interviews that this is supposed to be an origin story, even though a pup named Scooby-Doo already exists, but I digress. But to take a decades-old IP and make it about yourself is just kind of tacky and weird, to say the least. Especially when the entire cast is in love with her self-insert. It's not even just that they changed the outward appearances of the characters, but just that these characters are totally unrecognizable, their personalities are completely different, which they had to do in order to make the self-insert work. Now Velma is largely unlikable. She's rude, abrasive, mean, and pretty much spends the entire time fighting with everyone. A complete departure from the original character, and I think that's another aspect that makes this so egregious. Velma is a pre-existing character, and at this point she has decades worth of history, and for them to take a pre-existing character and force her to be the executive producer's self-insert is just weird. I do think that making it attached to the Scooby-Doo IP gave it more attention than it would have on its own, but I also think it wouldn't have had so much baggage. Velma often gets compared to Mandy from I Am Not Starfire, another character who's accused of being a self-insert, considering how much she looks like the writer Mariko Tamaki. Starfire is a character who's existed since the 80s, but it appears that she wrote herself as Starfire's teenage daughter, despite being a middle-aged woman, which is quite a choice. Like with any trope, I do think it's possible to use self-insert in a more effective way, but first of all, it should be an original IP, not an already existing one, and it should probably be more than just wish fulfillment, or using it as a way to vent your frustrations and hide it under comedy, just saying. In my opinion, a good example of this is Gravity Falls, a TV show that aired on Disney Channel. The show was created by Alex Hirsch, and he's pretty open about the inspiration. The show stars twins Dipper and Mabel Pines, who are based off of Alex and his own twin sister Ariel.
Dipper and Mabel are based on myself and my twin sister Ariel. She, growing up, often wore very silly, vibrant, goofy sweaters, and we make sure that Mabel has a different sweater in every episode. I was the opposite. I wore the exact same thing every single day, the same hat, the same little shorts.
The twins spend the summer with their great-uncle Stan, who in turn is inspired by Hirsch's grandfather Stan, and as children they would go on vacation to visit him, and he always wished that something spectacular would happen.
When I spent these summers as a kid out in the woods, I dreamed that I would get to meet a gnome or fight a monster or solve a mystery, go back in time, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a show that does all of those?
So as an adult, he made a cartoon where those kinds of things could happen. Even though Gravity Falls is largely a self-insert, and based on the creator's own experiences, there's enough here for the audience to connect with. Plus, it's his own original IP, so he's not taking someone else's work and making it basically unrecognizable. Writers who create their own properties ultimately have more control over what they make, because they don't have to worry about the expectations of the pre-existing audience. J.G. Quintel is another cartoon creator who, like Alex Hirsch, used a level of self-insertion when creating his shows, which include Close Enough and Regular Show. He even voices Josh and Mordecai respectively.
It really was just the way we acted in school, like all the oh and like the that is me and my friends from school.
But what sets these shows apart from something like Velma is that they do have wide appeal, rather than only appealing to the writers. So I guess in the end, it's not really that self-insert is a bad thing. It's more like the decisions around the self-insert need to actually serve the story, instead of just being a fluff piece or a mouthpiece for the writers. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you think self-inserts can work, or do you think it's best to avoid them entirely? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, Jay Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Jinke Z, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Owen Wildish, Mac B909, Caleb Nelson, Data Dine Executive, Crimson Phantom, and Dakari the Professor. Thank you all so much for your support. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have a Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content. And that part's free. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.